And all right, so good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's coaching call. If you've been going in order for your coaching calls, this is our last pillar that we're going to talk about this evening. It is sleep. Our five pillars that we have tried to go pretty much in order since the beginning of the year have been our fitness pillar, our nutrition pillar, our hydration pillar. Last week, we were going to talk about sleep, but I had a little bit of a coaching moment that I wanted to share with you guys last week. And so we did some mindset work last call. We talked about that, and we'll probably talk about that a little bit more. There is so much there, but I know that people think when they hear mindset, it like voodoo registers, and so it really is the key to a performance, right? And that means whatever your performance is, if it's trying to like stand up out of your chair or win the Olympics, whatever you are training to do, your mindset is one of the major determinants. Your neurology, your brain is what is driving the show. So while we kind of sometimes forget all about mindset and our perspective and our belief system and how that influences what we do, it's a big deal. It's kind of a big deal. So anyway, so we talked about that last week. We'll talk about it again in the weeks coming up. I will be offering the amazing and magical workshop. Not in March. I think it's in the beginning of April. Don't quote me. It might actually be the last week of March, but that is coming up. For those of you who would like to do it as a coached client, you can jump right into that workshop at no extra charge. I think it's a great, if you have the space for it, it's a great addition. Okay, so today we're going to touch on sleep. So, we've come out of this like dark age of sleep where everybody just thought like, we're wearing our sleeplessness as a badge of honor, like, oh, I only slept, whatever, and I'm crushing it and whatever. And internally our bodies don't super love all of that, right? We can do it. Our bodies adapt with different hormones and compensation mechanisms, and we get second winds and third winds and all of that kind of stuff, adrenaline rushes and all this stuff that goes along with it. But now we sort of start to see what the repercussions of that, speediness and sleeplessness, what kind of toll that took on our health. And because we've had such advances in medicine over the last 20 years, we really can dial in like what is going on in our brains. Are we just laying there? In fact, we're super active on the inside while we sleep. So, you guys, on your pillars, it always says like, did I sleep more than 8 hours? And the reason why we want to get to sleep for 8 hours or aim to get to 8 hours is because we want to have what we call sleep architecture. So for those of you who have talked with me about like sleep apps, sleep hygiene, if you have a sleep app or an Apple Watch or some kind of device that tracks your sleep, it's probably going to give you this like hills and valley graph, up and down, up and down, up and down. And it probably starts kind of up at the top because you're awake, and then it might come down a little bit and then come back up almost awake, but not quite. And then it's going to come down a little bit more, and then it's going to come back up almost awake, but not quite. And then it's going to go down even more and come back up. And the more it kind of comes in and out of these sleep stages, there are things that happen in each of those stages that are integral to our rest and recovery, for memory, for cognition. And the big one that we typically talk about is cortisol. Our cortisol levels are managed. We do kind of this like housekeeping or like, taking out the garbage kind of thing, right? So the brain goes through, it consolidates things that it believes that are important, puts it in certain places, tries to get rid of the garbage, take that stuff out. And so that's one kind of, episode. And through this process, our cortisol levels start to get reset to baseline. Okay. And that's really what we want. Okay. So our cortisol levels somewhere, probably around 4 o'clock on the best case scenario, 4 a.m. if you're going to be, all of it being relative, but we're going to call it 4 a.m. for argument's sake, because these things are, they do shift depending on what time you go to bed, what time you wake up, and how much sleep and all of that stuff. But let's just call it somewhere around 4 a.m. Your cortisol levels probably are at the lowest that they're going to be. And now they're going to start to amp themselves back up because they're thinking we're going to have to get up soon and we want to be alert. And cortisol translates to alert. Okay. So cortisol is also amped up when we have a stress reaction, not when we have stress, when we have a stress reaction, which is why when we talk about mindset and stress resiliency, we cannot dictate the world to be a stress-less place because that's not going to happen. And it doesn't need to happen. What we need to do is to train ourselves to be more resilient and less reactive when we're faced with stress. And we want to then create some tools and processes so that we aren't reactive in the face of a stressful scenario. We're calm cucumbers, right? So, when we are reactive, we jack that cortisol up. If we have a lot of unmanaged stress, cortisol keeps building throughout the day. So it kind of kicks up in the morning. And cortisol does have these sort of like natural ebb and flows throughout the day. Highest in the morning, get up. Get up, you got to get alert, right? So if you're like, oh, like mine doesn't work, right? It probably does. You might be sluggish getting up for other reasons, but your cortisol is likely highest in the AM, okay? Ebbs and flows throughout the day. If you are unable to get your cortisol levels to baseline through your sleeping, when you do wake up, they are even higher. So your baseline gets higher. So now, if you have more stress, unmanaged stress during the day, and we're building your cortisol levels, they're just constantly going up and going up. One of the side effects of increased cortisol is usually a fat accumulation around the belly. So if you're like, I can't really seem to get rid of this fat accumulation around my belly, we want to always look at your stress. And this is a lot of times for women in menopause or hormonal change. We see a lot of fat deposition around the midsection, and it's kind of challenging to get rid of because hormones always win. They run the show and they always win. So we want to work with them instead of against them. So what we do is we work to get our cortisol levels as low at baseline as we possibly can. So even if you're not a female in, pre-menopause, menopause, any of the phases, if your stress levels are high, male and female alike, we are still going to see adipose tissue or fat accumulation around the belly. It's not I might hear doctors say, like, if you have fat around your midsection, that's very unhealthy. It doesn't really have so much to do with the fat around the midsection as it has to do with what that is a sign and symptom of, right? All the other things in the body, when it doesn't lay down fat kind of evenly distributed throughout the body, when we do that, we're like, okay, we probably have an excess of calories somewhere. We need to address that issue, right? But when it's in, the spot around the belly, the signs and symptoms there are usually, some other things going on, unmanaged stress, increased stress hormones. Cortisol is not the only one. There are others, aldosterone. There's a whole bunch that are emitted that can stay high, but cortisol is like he's the most popular guy, cortisol, and I've made him a guy. So anyway, what we want to do for sleep with all of that information. And I started out doing these up and down kind of things throughout the night. The more times we can get the mountains and the peaks in that graph, should you get one, the more opportunity we have to reset cortisol levels. And that is the reason for 8 hours of sleep. Because if we're only in bed for 6 hours, then we are cutting down how many times we can go in and out of that sleep, those values. We might cut a full sleep cycle off. Sleep cycles in general are about 90 minutes. So if we cut off an hour and a half, we likely are cutting off one cycle that could be restorative at some point. The only solid substitution that I have seen for this would be deep meditation. So when people practice meditation and they get really good at it, we've put, the nodes on their the nodes on and measured brain waves. that we can measure, meditation is actually a little bit more, it resets our cortisol even more so than just sleep, right? So, it's more powerful. So I don't know that anybody's really meditating for 8 hours, right? That would be like, I don't know. I don't know. I'm sure somewhere in this world, maybe. But in general, if you see people who meditate on a regular basis and they have the research to show that will actually reset our cortisol levels with those theta waves that are generated during meditation. So, in lieu of meditation, which of course you can do, but it does take practice, right? So, meditating, you might start for like 1 minute a day. And most of you might hear me tell you to do a breathing exercise for 1 minute a day. This is a form of meditation. And that so much is not going to get your cortisol levels to totally reset or be restorative in the theta waves, but it's a step in the right direction to get there. And it will help you with your stress resiliency. So 1 minute a day does show us that. It's not quite those deep theta waves yet. So that's kind of our baby step toward, a more meditative state. And I do encourage everybody to do 1 minute every day of breathing. It is just, I mean, what a break. When you set a timer and see like what a minute is, you're like, oh, this is great. And just working on a breathing exercise to help you with that stress resiliency, stress management tool. So we want to make sure that we're getting 8 hours of sleep. So sometimes we struggle to get ourselves to bed on time. We struggle to fall asleep, and and then we struggle to stay asleep. So there's a few different things that we address with sleep through the program. If you are struggling to get to sleep, we put together a sleep guide, and we'll work together because there's again a bunch of tools, and you can choose from your sleep routine. I like to tell people to start 30 minutes out from bedtime, and the first step is choose your bedtime and make it the same every night, and use your wake up time the same every morning. Here's the kick in the pants people hate is if you have to get up and be somewhere Monday through Friday, so you might have to get up a little bit earlier. People tend to sleep in on the weekends. I would strongly recommend that you do not, and that you keep the same wake up time on Saturday and Sunday. If you are well rested, well fed, manage your energy, do all of the things that we are doing, that is not a struggle. You likely will not feel the need on a regular basis to sleep in on Saturdays and Sundays when everything is well managed. It sounds ridiculous, but it's true. Okay. When everything is working, we manage your energy effectively through all of the pillars. It's just another day, right? It's our mindset that tells us that we need to sleep in on the weekends. So try to keep your sleeping time, your bedtime the same. Try to keep your wake up time the same. And then we work on putting together a sleep guide for you 30 minutes before sleep to tell your brain, okay, here's what we're doing. We are getting ready for sleep. And, so, there will be a whole list of stuff you probably have seen. If you haven't, and you're struggling with sleep, at some point you will. And the things that that I recommend aren't like, oh, you got to do all of these things. We want to pick and choose what's going to work for you. I know that I've worked with people before that are like, the idea of needing to calm down initially creates more of a stressful scenario. So we want to make sure that what we're choosing does in fact have you calm down, not amp up. Okay. So we work on that. Also work on, once you're in bed, maybe we also need to do some breath work to help you fall asleep. A lot of times people use the TV to distract your brain to listen to something else. We lay in bed, brain's like, whew, made it through that day. Now let's go over all of these problems that we didn't get sorted today, right? And so now you're just sitting there perseverating on these problems. Stress goes up, you're not sleeping. So we want to maybe in that scenario, we'll work on some activities that we can do to try to interrupt that for you. And other things that if you're waking up in the middle of the night, that might be, and you know that I started out this like little graph with my finger here. If you're watching the video, I started up way at the top of the graph and then came down a little bit and then came back up almost to awake and then came down a little bit more and then came back up almost to awake. When your cortisol levels are elevated at baseline, when you come back up to almost awake, your cortisol levels are too high, you're awake, right? Because your baseline got higher. So now you're waking up probably every 90 minutes. Is usually this, or you're awake for 90 minutes kind of thing, right? So we would then work on not, yes, of course, we want to try to get you back to sleep, but really we want to look at things outside of sleep so we can work on your stress reactivity, your stress resiliency to help you get a better night's rest. Obviously, there are other things in the environment. Sometimes people have partners in the room. There might be snoring. There might be blankets stealing. There might be all kinds of other things that we can certainly find solutions for. But I want to just make sure that everybody understands that sleep is a part of your health, and it is an important piece of your health too. So it's not something like, oh yeah, but like I didn't, once in a while, we're not going to sleep well. That's not a big deal. But when we have chronic, low quality, interrupted sleep, where our brains are going to start to suffer, and so is our health. So that is our fifth pillar that we've gone over. So as a reminder for you guys, because I like to say your pillars because they're important and there's not much outside of the pillars that you guys need to work on as far as health is concerned. So fitness, daily movement, right? Fitness doesn't always mean CrossFit, just means we're moving, we're doing something, stimulate our physiology. Nutrition, what you're putting in is not toxic to your body. It's nutrient dense, and we're giving our body the things that it needs. Where, it's like you don't want to, have somebody, hey, go build a brick house, but we're only going to give you 4 bricks, right? Like we want to give the nutrients, right? We need the building blocks, right? So we got fitness, nutrition, your hydration, half your body weight in ounces each day. Every transaction of your metabolism needs fluid, needs water. So we want to make sure that we have that. Talked about your stress and your sleep. And the stress and the sleep, like I said, they kind of are, they run parallel. I like to kind of put them at the end because they do continually cross over. Your stress definitely impacts your sleep, and your sleep definitely impacts your stress. So those two kind of go together. So if we can think about our pillars, those 5 things. Typically, when you start out, you don't do all 5 at once. We start with the nutrition, start with the fitness, we progress from there as we can. If we continually move in the right direction, we're going to get healthier. So as long as you're moving forward, don't worry about expectations or pace or weight loss rates or any of that business. Healthy habits will always yield a healthier person. All right. So that is the lesson this evening on sleep. I did mention the workshop. So if you do think like, oh, maybe I want to find out a little bit more about that mindset, shoot me an email. I don't think the signups will be available for a couple of weeks, but if you're interested, let me know so I could put you on the list. All right, I'll open it up for any questions and see what we get. I always feel like I should do the like Jeopardy, like I should cue that up and play it. I don't know. I don't think I can do it today, but we can do it in our heads. And it's 30 seconds. So, all right, I've done one round. That should be good enough. All right, so no questions this evening. Now I'm leaving you with the Jeopardy song in your head. I hope you're not tortured by it for the rest of the evening. And I wish you all a very healthy week. All right, talk to you guys soon.